Welcome to Engaging ESG, where we consider, challenge, and celebrate the evolving world of environmental, social, and governance communications, all in an increasingly complex landscape. I'm Jennifer Owens, marketing executive and consultant.
And I'm Kati Callens, Global Head of Sustainability at Adobe. For Season 4, we're once again talking with climate leaders who are shaping the present and future of sustainability messaging. From connecting with stakeholders to crafting compelling impact stories, we're uncovering the strategies that worked and learning from those that didn't.
Whether you're a seasoned pro or new to the field, you'll find practical tips and insights in every episode.
And whether you're working on your first sustainability report or reimagining your organization's climate narrative, these conversations will help you navigate the complexities of ESG communications. Let's get started.
Hello, Kati. How are you doing?
Hi, Jen. Great to see you again.
Same here. We are deep into this season. This is getting good now.
Yes, and we're bringing in more global voices, which I'm really excited about with our guest today. Would you like to do the honors?
I would absolutely love to. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Gus Bartholomew, co-founder of Leafr, a marketplace that connects businesses with top-tier freelance, specialty, and sustainability professionals. Before launching Leafr, Gus co-founded Supply Compass, a B2B SaaS platform that helped fashion brands bring more sustainable work to their supply chains. He spent 5 years on the ground in India and Asia, helping fashion and homeware brands optionalize sustainability. And now with Leafr, he's tackling another huge sustainability challenge, which is the expertise gap. Sustainability teams are under enormous pressure to deliver on increasingly complex, regulated, and time-critical mandates with leaner and leaner and leaner resources. Leafr's answer is to offer on-demand access to a vetted network of more than 1,000 specialists across the UK, Europe, and US. We want to hear all about it. So, Gus, thank you for joining Engaging ESG.
Thanks very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, Kati, you are on mute.
I'm on mute. If only I'd done a couple seasons of a podcast before.
It'd be awesome.
Welcome, Gus. We are truly live. So I'd love to start at the beginning to learn a little bit more about Leafr as an organization, but here we love an origin story. We love a little narrative. So to take us back, you and your co-founder, Nick, came at this concept of a sustainability expertise gap from really different directions. First of all, we saw that you sought clients with tools, but not a lot of expertise to use them. And Nick saw corporates with budgets struggling to find the right skills. What made you think you could solve for both simultaneously? And tell us a little bit more about Leafr.
Yeah, of course. So, Nick and I come at it from very different angles. He'd worked at big four consultancy firms initially as a management consultant and then as a sustainability consultant, and seen and come up against a lot of the issues that corporates were having. I had come at sustainability from a very different angle, as you said, basically kind of boots on the ground experience, working at the kind of hard nose of that in fashion supply chains, and really seeing how difficult it was to do certain things, and the huge difference between often, at least for me, the things that were being said or being asked by multinationals or Western businesses, and then the reality of what was actually happening in the supply chain. So you start to get into this whole new world of there's lots of certifications, there's lots of tools that you can be implemented, but actually there's such a human element of it down deep in the supply chain that no certification or no technology can really truly solve. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, Nick and I really came together because one thing that we saw so often for businesses of all sizes really was that they're struggling to find the skill sets that they actually needed to deliver. There's no denying it. There's no getting around it. Sustainability teams are generally tiny. We do a report every year. It's called The True State of Sustainability, where we go out and we interview about 450 sustainability leaders. We understand about what's going on in their teams. And surprise, surprise, the most quoted number of people in sustainability teams at large businesses is one. And the vast majority of businesses have between 1 and 3. And this is, these are organizations that have got tens, if not tens of thousands of employees. So it's a really, really, really difficult job. And so we wanted, even though there's this huge amount more in terms of regulation and pressure to do the right thing, ultimately teams are so incredibly under-resourced that we saw that there just had to be a better way.
Wow. And so what were your steps in putting that together? Because you brought in that in person, do you start with these types of expertise and these, because you could solve for every problem at the same time. So I'm wondering how your on the ground experience influenced how you started to structure Leafr.
Yeah, so it was actually very, very organic for Nick. He originally kind of saw this demand, set up a website, and suddenly had loads of people flooding him from both sides. He was working as an independent sustainability consultant. He was saying, oh, yeah, we really, really need this help. We can't afford to go for an big, but you've got this right experience for us. And so it really, really started organically there. And it's kind of actually one of the things that, being honest, we struggle with as a business, because we do have such broad expertise in our network that we're mainly working with kind of mid to large size businesses. But actually, the breadth of the requests that we get through are phenomenal. There's definitely hot spots, and I think we tend to skew towards more of the initiatives that your more typical corporate clients are needing. So, carbon accounting, LCAs, SBTI, net zero, transition plans, that kind of thing, a lot of ESG reporting as well. But we also have these amazing pockets of specialists in really, really niche areas too. So we kind of pride ourselves on the fact that if you're an organization that needs specialist support, we can probably help you. There have been a few times in Leafr's history where we haven't managed to support, where someone's asked for something really incredibly niche, like a battery expert that speaks Swedish that's based in Hungary. And that we're struggling on. For sure.
Right.
Oh, of course, that's Vasily. Everyone knows Vasily. Come on.
But no, just to build on Jen's question, I do think we have talked quite a bit on the podcast about the idea of the evolution of the sustainability role and platform. And so it makes sense to me that you all saw this opportunity in the marketplace of 1 to 3 people teams, of which I am on one of those. Can't do everything, of course. And honestly, it's not a good use of the company's time, right, to train me in all of those particular expertise when we think about ROI. But I also think it's interesting looking at your website, right? You call out the term fractional CSO, which is a term that I think is relatively new, but I've been seeing so much more. And to me, it also feels like an outgrowth of the pandemic and remote work and just kind of shifting workplace dynamics and people trying to balance really important priorities like family. So would just love to hear your thoughts generally about the evolution of these roles and people trying to find work that both aligns with their values and expertise, but also is flexible.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of that. There's a huge rise in the number of people that want to work independently. Just to give you an idea of the numbers, we've got 1,000 vetted consultants in our network. We've had something like 6,000 that have applied to work for Leafr. So we have a very low acceptance rate. We get about 20 people per day signing up to work as independents through us.
Wow.
So, there's definitely continued interest in this area. And I think there's 2 things which I find really, really interesting here. We also obviously speak to a huge number of CSOs and heads of sustainability. We run a community for them as well. We've got about 350 heads of sustainability and CSOs that we can meet up with and engage with regularly. And I think what's been really interesting there is also understanding how a lot of sustainability folk are finding it with working within businesses. So often, they feel under incredible pressure to deliver. They have these quite insane mandates that are impossible, where they're asked to cover absolutely everything. We make the joke often, it's like, oh, it's easy being a sustainability manager. All you've got to cover is reporting, compliance, strategy, comms, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The list goes on, right?
Just
it's
every role within the company, no big deal.
Exactly. So I think that there's also this element of, by going independent, you can really focus and hone your skills to be on one thing that you're really, really good at. And that in turn also makes you incredibly attractive to businesses that need that distinct skill. So there's one thing here, which I also think is really important. Like, sustainability is moving incredibly quickly, right? You literally, you blink and regulation has changed. There's a new version of SBTI that you suddenly need to get up to speed with. CSRD has changed. Oh, we're no longer doing this, we're doing that. How we think about carbon accounting has changed. And these are really deep specialist skills. And I think the way that we think about why you want to hire an independent specialist is that someone who's done a thing, say, once before, is really about 3 times more qualified than the person that's trying to do it for the first time. So if someone has done a really niche footprinting exercise for a particular product 3 times, they are going to absolutely blow it out the park when they do it a 4th time. And because they're able to specialize and just rinse, repeat. It's the typical thing, right? Specialize and become great at something, and it becomes way easier. And so that's what we're really advocating for businesses, which is, look, we understand that you're under incredible pressure when it comes to the economic pressures of your business. I really believe that most businesses want to do good when it comes to sustainability. They want to transform, but they've got to work within the confines of the economy. And so what we're saying is, like, look, we understand that you're never going to be able to sign off hiring a team of 20 sustainability folk. And frankly, like, it would be a waste because so many of those people would be massively underutilized. You're much better off having a LCA expert who is going out doing LCAs week in, week out. And then when you do need them for that 3-month sprint, bring them in. And they've just got incredible experience. So what we really advocate for is a small internal core team that is basically leading on internal strategy, internal alignment, internal comms, and that they are bringing in these specialists with exact skill sets to deliver the exact thing that they need as and when they need. Because let's be clear, so much sustainability work is massively spiky and cyclical.
That's it. You're making me have PTSD thinking about some content I did about CSRD, and I had to update it 3 times in a month because it was so substantially different, and where it touched all the articles on this website. That's terrible. And I'm like, oh, because you think, well, that language is near, and then you're like, oh, no, it's substantially changed. I have to do it again. Which makes me think that looking at these certain pockets that you can see the weather report of where the hotspots are. Brilliant. Are you seeing a rise of interest around EPR? Like what people are reacting to are PFAS and like where the attention is going.
Exactly. Yeah, we do see that. I mean, it's very, very interesting, and it changes almost on a monthly basis where these hotspots appear. Yeah, and it's funny. I think we definitely get a view of the market from that. I also think, and we don't like to try and say that a consultant is the perfect solution for every single situation. So I think what we end up seeing is these discrete pockets of work that are very suited to bringing in an independent. But there's a lot of it in terms of new policy, regulation, reports, etc. It's a great fit.
What have you learned about what actually makes a good consultant-client match beyond just technical skills? Because some of what I'm thinking about right now is, how do you see someone's CV and know that they're going to be a good fit for these kind of more bespoke projects, let's say? And then also, how do you suss out? It sounds like there's a lot of relationship building that you do on the client side as well.
Yeah, I mean, so we have a very stringent vetting process for bringing consultants on board, and we look for particular things there. The number one thing which kind of links back to what I was saying before, is really around their case studies. What have they actually done before? And because there's also, I think it's one of those, I think it's true across a lot of business, but there's actually company to company, this huge amount of repetitive work going on. And so if you can hire a consultant who can very easily demonstrate, look, I've taken this business, which is not a dissimilar business in a adjacent or even in the same industry, yours, through their first CSRD report, they are immediately going to be the best person to lead that. So I think that's a key thing. And then, of course, just like the ability for them to be a good consultant. We've actually just started to run a course to actually kind of help address this, because I think that what we've seen from the 6,000 or so people that have applied is that there's a lot of people who are technically brilliant, but aren't necessarily well positioned to actually engage effectively and run projects with clients. So we're running a course which is mainly to non-Leafr consultants to help them upskill and actually understand what's the best way to engage with clients and actually run projects.
That's fascinating. Well, because of course, our whole discussion is about being an expert around reporting or an expert around LCA. And then we're saying, well, you also need to be able to be an expert in running your own business, which is being a consultant. And that, these are very different skills. And I've got to assume that with what's happened in the market right now with sustainability jobs at the end of last year, I don't know what's happening in January right now, but that there's a flood of talent out there. So there is competitiveness even as a consultant to pitch yourself.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of talent. For me, from looking at it from a company's perspective, there's never a better time for you to be using an independent, because the quality of consultant that you're getting with that level of experience is quite incredible. I mean, just to kind of highlight the point, we've got a number of ex-CSOs and heads of sustainability who were in our community that have now transitioned over to the consultant side. And we see a bit of flow between both sides of our marketplace, which is interesting. But yeah, in terms of the quality of the talent and the experience of the talent, I mean, yeah, never a better time.
Well, and then when you have, as a consultant, as they're coming in, I mean, do you see a difference in what companies of different sizes need? And I'm thinking about being kind of shoehorned into something that's very specific for a very large company, or being more expansive for a smaller company? Or am I just assuming that that's the way that these consultants are, that their size of the company has an impact on what the roles are that they're asked to do?
Massively so, yeah. I mean, we have how we definitely split it in terms of industry, company size, specialism. And like we said in this course, we really want people to find a very, very narrow ideal customer profile that they are really, really great at, i.e. help CFOs at medium-sized bottle manufacturers in Europe get their first CSRD report signed off, that kind of specialism, because it's much better to have that niche. And as I was saying, just keep doing that thing, because you just get more efficient, much more experience, and you're just able to create so much more impact.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think my experience is probably not unusual in the sense that when I came into Adobe, so many members of the sustainability and CSR team had switched over in the last couple of years that some of our consultants had more institutional knowledge than the people within the company, which is really interesting. And so we have wonderful consultants, and I'm grateful for their expertise. But then it does lock you into this particular relationship with one organization. And then if people leave, right, you kind of have that brain drain a little bit. And so I see Leafr as also potentially like a safe way for people to even pressure test. I want to be doing my first double materiality assessment. Our go-to consultants always charge this, and they know XYZ about the company, but even just getting a little bit of like a context within the marketplace.
Yeah, completely.
Well, I would love to talk about because this is how you first came on my radar with the Sustainababble translator. And I was like, oh my God, these guys are hilarious. I want it. So I love it. Tell us all about it. I know it was from a little while ago, but I'd love what's happening with it.
Of course. Yes. I mean, where this came out of, which is, I guess, just to poke a little bit of fun at our own industry.
What? We never do that.
Well, yeah, some people take it well, others not so well. But the whole point is, I think that it's very easy to get drowned in sustainability alphabet soup, right? There's acronyms left, right, and center. And we can, I think in terms of an industry, we can tend to get too passionate. People tend to get so into a topic that actually becomes very, very alienating. And actually, we've got to remember the bigger picture here, why we are actually doing these things and who we have to convince. And so the point with Sustainababble was that we often find ourselves talking in these terms where actually you can be sitting in a room and everyone else is kind of nodding politely, but they ain't got a clue what you're talking about.
That's
Right.
me. When you got the phone underneath the desk and you're like, wait, what the, yeah.
Exactly. What does this next acronym mean? And so the Sustainababble thing that we launched was this is just a fun little tool where you could basically put in whatever you were actually trying to get across in your words, like Sustainababble language, and translate it for any department you could choose.
Oh.
So, hey, take this and convert it so that it actually makes sense and is understood. And ultimately, the most important thing, that it becomes meaningful for the finance department or the ops department. Talk about it in their terms. Because if you're often asking people to do extra work or take on extra things. And so this was just a fun way of trying to help get your message across.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think to take it a step further, it'd be wonderful to understand, what does the translator, and even the fact that you needed to create it, tell you about the real barriers to sustainability adoption inside companies? Would you say that jargon and communication friction is actually a bigger blocker than technical expertise and budget constraints?
It's an interesting point. I think it can be, if you choose to be. It depends how you pick your fights, I think, right?
Right.
Because I think a lot of sustainability leaders can feel like it's them against the rest of the company. And how can everyone else not see what they're seeing? And so that can be very alienating when that person feels like they've got a huge amount of knowledge. So give them a way to actually build bridges and bring other people on board, I think, is a massively important part of the role. And actually, kind of it links to a point that I think is also really useful to make, where I think that, I guess I come at the sustainability problem from like a structural point of view. Like, how do you actually build the right team? What does it look like? What's the size? How does it function? But most importantly, who does it report into? And this is where answers wildly differ from every business. And you can tell a lot from the answers. But I always say you've got to have your whoever's leading on sustainability reporting into, or as close to as possible, into the CEO or the board. Because if you're talking about real sustainability, actual business transformation, things like if you're going to hit net zero, that is never, ever going to happen if your lead is reporting into someone 3 levels down from the person who is calling the ultimate shots. So, I always think about, like, if you're genuinely committed to making sustainable transformation within your business, then there are certain things which ultimately are kind of non-negotiable.
Yes, you actually have to transform if you're here to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when this comes out, it'll still be kind of the beginning of the year. Where do you see the year going? This is your predictions corner. What do you see around the corner? Because you have a very specific window into what's happening.
Yeah, it's still quite early to tell, I think.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in terms of the macro environment and what that means, I guess, both in the US and in Europe. We've seen some sort of clawing back of approaches. But I think the broader thing that I do think we are seeing is that companies that are really committed are still committed and doing the work, but they're just doing it a little bit more quietly. There's commitments that have been made, there's targets that have been set, there's less kind of trumpet blowing and bravado going on, but there is still a huge amount there. It's one of the things that I said at some point late last year, which again, maybe ruffled a few feathers, but I think it's an interesting one when looking at this, which is that I said, Trump has actually done more for greenwashing than anyone else before, because his view on climate change and all of this has basically given the people who don't care and would just feeling like they had to put on a show a reason to not do anything. And so I think you've now got these two pools of companies, which is like people who are genuinely committed and were doing this because they wanted to for all the right reasons. And then the people who felt forced into ESG reporting that are now going, you know what, we're kind of not going to do it. So I think you've got this interesting situation where you've got two big groups of businesses doing very, very different things. And you've seen that there's great examples of it with big global alliances falling apart, right? That had been building over the last few years. But then other things like SBTI is a great example. I mean, that the number of businesses that have signed up to that is still growing at an astronomical rate. There is a lot to be positive about still.
That's great. We love ending on a provocative note. We look forward to hearing our listeners' thoughts on whether or not they agree with Gus. And well, maybe have to have a part 2 to hash it out. I love the European perspective. I think we can be so caught up in our own government. And what I'm constantly trying to remind folks at Adobe and other companies is that we are global companies. We have global stakeholders. Like, this is just one very loud dictator right now. So to close things out, we love to hear from our guests how you are taking care of yourself. You're sustaining the sustainability professional. Is there anything on your bookshelf, TV, or earbuds that is really keeping you grounded these days?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess how I care for myself, I'm an avid runner. So I like to just get out and pound the pavement at least 4 times a week. That's what keeps me sane between the work. And then in terms of listening, one of the things, I think this is more an observation of something that I think is really positive with some podcasts, which is that my kind of go-to, I almost can't keep up with so many episodes that come out, is The Rest is Politics, but this is the UK version rather than the US version. And there was something really positive which happened that. It's the most downloaded podcast in the UK, most listened to. And they made a concerted effort about 6 months ago after listeners had called in to say, you need to be talking about climate more and the impact that it's having and what we need to do about it. And they really have done that, which is great. And I think the thing that I like about that most is that I think that it's really important to be aware of all of the geopolitics that are going on. And so being up to date, understanding the constraints that businesses, that governments, that individuals are all under, because I think we can often get so caught up in, oh, well, why aren't you doing this in terms of sustainability? It's the right thing to do. There's so many other pressures. So having that, as much as you can, that kind of systems view on thing, I think is really important. And then in terms of a recommended book read, this is slightly out there as well, but I heard something great the other day, which is that this comes down to sustainability teams and budgets, which is that marketing teams, when it comes to budget season, will always go into that budget meeting and ask for 3 times the amount that they need. And they'll fight tooth and nail to try and get that.
I don't know what you're talking about, sir.
and then they walk out and they've probably got a third or maybe half of what they came in. But actually, that's more than enough of what they needed. Whereas the sustainability lead will often go through their budget with a tooth comb, try and reduce it, get it to a stage where I reckon this can probably be signed off, and then maybe get given 70% of that. And so my book recommendation is actually Chris Voss's Don't Split the Difference, because I think that learning how to negotiate more effectively as a sustainability leader for things like budget or with anyone where ultimately you're always going to have to compromise to some degree is an incredibly important and underrated skill within the sustainability department.
I love it. Oh, my goodness. Okay, we've got our homework, listeners. Gus, thank you so much for joining us on Engaging ESG. This has been a delight. And I'm now realizing I need to focus more on whatever it is, the skills that I have. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us on Engaging ESG. Have a question for us to consider or a strategy you'd like us to cover? Email us today at engagingesg@gmail.com.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to engaging ESG today. It helps us grow, and even better, be sure to share the podcast with your favorite sustainability, diversity, or social impact colleague. And until next time, keep engaging.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.